So while browsing through the endless stream of videos in my YouTube Shorts feed, I stumbled upon this video.
अब आपको आपका लाइफ पार्टनर कैसा चाहिए, राम जी जैसे या रावण जैसे? रावण के जैसा। एंड व्हाई? क्योंकि रावण ने सीता जी को चाहा था और उन्होंने बिना टच किए उसका अपहरण किया। और आज की जैसा कलयुग है, कलयुग में देखा जाए तो थोड़ा सा मेन को डोमिनेटिंग होना चाहिए टुवर्ड्स हिज पार्टनर ऑल्सो और टुवर्ड्स द सोसाइटी ऑल्सो। उसने सीता जी का अपहरण किया था पर बिना छुए वो लेके गया था, लेकिन इतने टाइम सीता जी उसके पास रही फिर भी रावण ने उसको कभी कुछ गलत टच या गलत तरीके से देखना या गलत कोई भी व्यवहार नहीं किया। इसलिए मैं तो चाहूंगी कि ऐसे कलयुग में मेरा पार्टनर रावण जैसा हो।
A partner to be like Ravan, not Shri Ram. Because apparently Ravan loved Sita ji, but he abducted her without even touching her, kept her confined but never touched her, never did any untoward thing against her will. Last year, another nice lady called Sohini, who writes for esteemed portals such as NYT, Al Jazeera, Mint, and The Hindu, made some fanciful claims about Ravan on the day of Dashera and even followed her tweet with the hashtag Bijoy Dashmi. As per Sohini, Ravan is a scholar. He's a master warrior. He avenged his sister Shurpanakha's humiliation. He understood consent and respected Sita. He did not trick anyone in Ram's family, even though his brother Vibhishan was tricked and persuaded by the other side. My God. Distortion of history is nothing new in my beloved country. But when ancient history is faked, it can have a severe impact on many generations. Many weird and questionable portals in India and around the world have always had a knack for showing Bharat and its history in false light, stooping astonishingly low to portray the evil as good is not a new development for them. But then, what is it about Ravan that attracts so many nice women? And was Ravan really all that noble? Hello and welcome to the maiden episode of the Atul Mishra Show, my solo podcast show for now, in which I will dissect subjects of national, international, social, political, historical, and cultural importance. Teaser, please. Okay, before starting, let us make one thing very clear. I will repeat 5 times. Valmiki Ramayana is the only Ramayana. Everything else is an adaptation. Valmiki Ramayana is the only Ramayana. Everything else is an adaptation. Valmiki Ramayana is the only Ramayana. Everything else is an adaptation. Valmiki Ramayana is the only Ramayana. Everything else is an adaptation. And for the last time, Valmiki Ramayana is the only Ramayana. Everything else is an adaptation. Rishi Valmiki is the only authority on the history of Ramayana. So does Valmiki ji mention Ravana as a scholar anywhere in the epic? Not particularly, but there are references here and there about him mastering the Vedas. What Valmiki ji does mention, in fact, in great details, is the supreme arrogance of Ravan. Here the following shloks. Nahi me vipriyam kritva shakyam magavata sukham praptum vaishravane napi na yamena na vishwana. And what does this mean? This means one who has caused displeasure to me, that is Ravan, cannot be happy, be it Indra or Kuber or Yam or even Vishnu. Kalasya chapyaham kalo daheyam api pavakam mrityu marana dharmena sanyoj yitu mutsahe. Wow, here Ravan says, I am the destroyer of the destroyer, that is Yama. I can burn even that which burns, that is fire. I can infuse death with the characteristics of death itself. Then he says, Daheyamepi sankriddhas tejas saditya pavako vatasya tarasa vegam nihantu mahamutsahe. He says, if angry, I can burn the sun and even fire with my radiance. I can arrest the speed of the wind instantly with my effort. The man was too full of himself. But the fact is that he was not invincible. He was thrashed by Kartavirya Arjun, who didn't even fight with him seriously. In another instance, Vanaraj Vali tucked Ravan in his armpit for days and took him to his son Angad as some sort of a doll. Ravan exhibited the specific traits and that echoes in the behavior and strategies of modern day terror masterminds. Yes, Ravan had control over various territories, including part of the forest Dandakaranya. These areas served as bases for launching attacks and operations, similar to how modern terror groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda establish and control territories to plan and execute their activities. These territories often became centers for training, planning, and launching attacks. Ravan's minions, Rakshas, were known for spreading terror among villagers, disrupting religious rituals, and enforcing their rule through fear, similar to the terror tactics used by contemporary terrorist groups. Now, these groups also disrupted local communities. They destroyed the local cultural, and religious symbols and instilled fear to assert control and influence. Ravan's command included area commanders like Khar, Dushan, Trishra, and Marich. Each of these commanders had significant autonomy and controlled large armies, paralleling the hierarchical and decentralized structure of modern terror organizations. These groups often have regional commanders who control specific areas and are responsible for carrying out attacks and operations. The acts of looting, pillage, and sexual violence attributed to Ravan's commanders resonate with the tactics employed by some terror groups to this date. Such groups have been known to engage in systematic pillage, destruction, and sexual violence as a tool of war and terror. Now, Ravan was highly skilled in Maya, which is a form of illusion or sorcery, you can say, allowing him to deceive and overpower his enemies. Modern terror masterminds often employ strategies of deception, propaganda, and psyops and psychological warfare to confuse or demoralize and defeat their enemies. Ravan's personal involvement in battles, especially in challenging situations, was kind of limited mostly to strategizing and collecting the spoils of the loot. Ravan, in a way, ran one of the world's first terror organizations with his headquarters in Lanka. And what about the womanizing nature of Ravan? One shlok of Valmiki ji makes it absolutely clear. Here it is. Kshiptaram parvatendrana suranam cha pramardanam uchchittaram cha dharmanam paradara bhimarshanam. He was the one who could lift and throw great mountains, torment even gods, violate dharma at the root, and cast an evil eye on the wives of others. Now, Shurpanakha. Shurpanakha becomes an interesting character in this narrative. Shurpanakha was a weird sort of terrorist who copulated with men and killed men in equal numbers. She is described by Valmiki ji as having an outrageous build with a big pot belly. Shurpanakha's physical appearance is stark and imposing, aligning with her menacing persona. Shurpanakha's attempt to disguise herself as a beautiful woman and seduce Sri Ram and later Lakshman showcases her man-eater character in both sense of the word. When Sri Ram committed to a life of monogamy, rebuffs her advances, he playfully directs her to Lakshman. Now, Lakshman's response, mirroring his brother's rejection, further exacerbates the situation. Her reaction to this double whammy, this double rejection, is immediate and violent. Upon being spurned by Lakshman, Shurpanakha attempts to attack and kill Sita Mata. It prompts Lakshman to retaliate by mutilating her, cutting off her nose and ears. Now, the narrative surrounding the abduction of Sita in Valmiki's Ramayana offers a complex interplay of motives and actions, particularly in the context of Shurpanakha's role and Ravan's decision to abduct Sita. This sequence of events is often subject to various interpretations, but a closer examination of the original text reveals a detailed chronology and motivation behind these actions. After being rejected and humiliated by both Sri Ram and Lakshman, Shurpanakha seeks revenge, by inciting Khar, Dushan and Trishra along with their 14,000 Rakshasas to attack Sri Ram. Sri Ram is Sri Ram. He, in a display of his formidable prowess, defeats the Rakshas army single-handedly within a short span, that is a prahar, showcasing his divine abilities. Realizing the extraordinary power of Sri Ram, Shurpanakha approaches Ravan in Lanka. Initially, Ravan mocks Shurpanakha's disfigured appearance, calls her ugly sister getting uglier, showing little concern for her plight. However, as Shurpanakha continues to describe Sri Ram's might and the defeat of the Rakshas, Ravan's interest is piqued, though he remains largely unconvinced with the military aspect of the tale. It is Shurpanakha's description of Sita's unparalleled beauty that ultimately sways Ravan. She uses vivid descriptions to appeal to Ravan's baser instincts, portraying Sita as an epitome of feminine allure. The verses from Sri Ramayana, as cited, emphasize Sita's beauty and the prestige that her companionship would confer. Shurpanakha's portrayal of Sita is designed to inflame Ravan's desire and ego, prompting him to consider abducting Sita. I am reading some of the verses. Naiva Devi, na Gandharvi, na Yakshi, na Chakinnari, Naivam Rupa Maya Nari Drishta Purva Mahitale. I had, and this is Shurpanakha saying, I had not seen such a beautiful woman earlier among the Gandharv or Yaksh or Kinnar. I have not seen such a beauty among the humans on earth. Second verse. Yasya Sita bhavet bharya yang cha hrishta parishvajet atiji vedsa sarveshu lokeshwapi purandarat. Whoever gets Sita as his wife, whoever she embraces happily, will wish to live longer than Indra, the breaker of fortresses in this world. And then the third verse. Tatu vistirna jagna pina shroni payodharam bharyarthe cha tavane tu mudyataham varananam viru pitasmi kruren lakshmanen mahabhuja. O mighty armed one, I have been disfigured by cruel Lakshman as I was attempting to bring that lady of broad thighs, pointed breasts, heavy hips, and a beautiful face to make her your wife. Point blank lie. So the turning point for Ravan comes when Shurpanakha describes Sita in glowing terms, inciting a mix of desire and competitive pride in him. Ravan's decision was purely driven by lust, not a brother's respect for his sister. Now, does Ravan touch Mata Sita? Short answer, yes, he does. How else can he abduct? Sita Mata was way too powerful to be lifted by some Maya created torrent. Valmiki ji vividly describes the act in these verses. Ityuktva Maithiling Vakyam Priyavadinim Abhigamya Sudishtatma Rakshasa Kama Mohita Jagraha Ravanasa Sita Buddha Ke Rohini Miva. Just as Buddha, that is planet Mercury, catches Rohini, which is a cluster of 5 stars, in the sky, the evil-minded, infatuated Ravan advanced towards the pitiable, pleasing Sita, caught hold of her. Vamena Sita Padmakshi Murdajeshu Karenasa Urvostu Dakshine Naiva Parijgraha Panina. What does Ravan do? Ravan seized with his left hand the lotus-eyed Sita by the hair and lifted her by the thighs with his right hand. So this urban legend, Ravan never touched Sita, came out of nowhere and became the truth. Till now, we have established that Ravan was not the greatest scholar, was not the greatest warrior ever, or someone who was driven by rage to avenge his sister, or a respectful man who wouldn't touch another person's wife. Before coming to Ravan making no advances against Mata Sita, let us look at the very colorful sex life of Ravana. And the narrator in this case is none other than Hanumanji. Ardha yojana vistirna mayatam yojanam hitata bhavanam rakshasendrasya bahu prasada sankulam. This describes Ravana's mansion. The mansion of the Lord of the Demons was a conglomeration of palaces, half a yojan long and half a yojan wide. Now, moving further, Tato Pashyat Kuthasinam Nana Varayambar Strajam Sahastram Varnarinam Nana Vesha Vibhushitam. He found thousands of beautiful women seated on carpets wearing different clothes and garlands and dressed in various attires. Parivritte ardharatre tu pananidravasham gatam kriditvo paratam ratro sushvapa balavattada. Drinking and sporting until midnight, they had dropped off to sleep tired. Tasam samvriddantani militakshini maruti apashyat padma gandhini vadanani suyoshitam. Hanuman ji looked at the faces of the well-bred young women with closed eyes and concealed teeth, fragrant like lotuses. Vyavrit Guru Pinastra Prakirana Varabhushana Pana Vyayama Kaleshu Nidra Prahita Chetasa. A few young women had their circular vermilion mark, that is the bindi, smudged. Some had their anklets loosened and had a few necklaces torn. Tapataka evodutta patninam ruchira prabha. Nana varna suvarnanam vaktra muleshu rejire. The fringes of their garments glowing beautifully close to the faces of the wives of Ravan with the different beautiful hues shone splendid like flags. Nrittavadritra kushala rakshasendra bhujangaka varabharana dharanyo nishannadadrishe. Hari. Hanumanji saw the women there wearing fine jewelry, performing dances, playing musical instruments, and resting on their lap or leaning into the arms of the demon king, that is Ravana. Now, these verses from Valmiki Ramayana vividly depict the grandeur of Ravana's palace and his extremely indulgent lifestyle, particularly highlighting his immense sexual appetite and perverse nature. The description of Ravana's mansion, half a yojan long, half a yojan wide, a conglomeration of palaces, sets the stage for the opulence and excess that defined his reign. This vast palace, sprawling over an enormous area, symbolizes not just Ravana's power and wealth, but also his insatiable desire and extravagance. The architecture itself, with its multitude of palaces, suggests a labyrinthine complexity and a lavishness fitting for the lord of the demons. Inside this grand palace, thousands of women are described as being adorned in various attires, seated on carpets, wearing different clothes and garlands. This image paints a picture of some sort of a harem where women dressed in finery and jewels are kept for Ravan's pleasure. Their presence in such large numbers and their elaborate adornments reflect Ravan's unbounded indulgence in sensual pleasures and his objectification of women as trophies and symbols of his conquests and desires. These verses further describe how these women, after a night of drinking and revelry, lay asleep, worn out by the night's activities. The scene of exhaustion and disarray with women's garments and jewelry in disheveled states further emphasizes the debauchery and excess that characterized Ravan's nightly pursuits. It paints a picture of indulgence taken to extremes, where pleasure and excess lead to a state of collapse and lethargy. The detailed descriptions of the women with their eyes closed and teeth concealed, faces fragrant like lotuses, and their ornaments and makeup in disarray create a vivid, almost palpable image of the aftermath of a night of indulgence. The imagery of smudged vermilion marks, loosened anklets, and disarranged necklaces speaks of the physicality and intensity of the revelry in one verse. Hanumanji observes women skilled in dance and music, resting on the lap or leaning into the arms of Ravana. This scene encapsulates Ravan's dominance and control, portraying him as the central figure in this dark world of opulence and unbridled sensuality. These women, adorned in fine jewelry, skilled in the arts of entertainment and love making, are symbolic of Ravan's voracious sexual appetite and his hedonistic approach to life. Now the question, why did Ravan not force himself upon Mata Sita? So yes, that's correct. Despite his formidable prowess and unscrupulous nature, there is a notable restraint shown by him in his interactions with Sita, the wife of Sri Ram. This restraint, contrary to his otherwise impulsive and aggressive disposition, is attributed to a curse placed upon him by Vedavati, a Rishipatni. Ravana's history with Vedavati is a tale of his overreaching ambition and its consequences. Vedavati was his 999th victim, a pious woman deeply immersed in meditation and penance. Ravan, known for his lack of respect of personal boundaries and consent, tried to force himself upon her. In response, Vedavati, outraged and violated, cursed Ravan that should he ever attempt to force himself upon a woman without her consent again, his head would explode into 1,000 pieces. So when Ravan abducts Sita, he is acutely aware of the curse's implications. His approach towards Sita is therefore cautious, subdued, and calculated. He resorts to persuasion and proposals of marriage, attempting to coax her into giving her consent. The idea of marriage in this context is symbolic of obtaining consent, aligning with the conditions of the curse. Ravan's threats to Sita about marrying him or facing dire consequences are a manifestation of his twisted interpretation of the curse's terms. He is bound by the curse to not force himself upon her, and therefore sees marriage as the only viable route to possess her. And that is Ravan for you in a nutshell. But wasn't he a great Shiv Bhakt, played Rudravina, and composed the great Shivatandav Strotam? Short answer, no. Long answer is a topic for another day. Hope you guys like this episode. I have no professional camera. I'm shooting this on my phone. My hands are free, as you can see. No professional lightings. I'm really sorry. But I promise that this solo podcast will grow bigger and better. And ladies, Mama I'm in love with a criminal is a nice catchy song. But do not act on it. Jai Shri Ram.